Hello and welcome to the Consistency Project with E.C. Synkowski. My name is Patrick Cummings, and every episode I have the distinct privilege of presenting E.C. with a question on subject matters that range from nutrition to fitness to the choices we can all make to live a healthier, more functional life. By exploring both the principles at play and the actions worth carrying out as a result, we aim to get you thinking, get you moving, and get you taking more consistent steps toward optimizing your well-being. I wonder how many episodes we're going to do this before I memorize that, because I don't have it yet. How you doing, EC?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. The last episode we did was based on a CNN article, and now not really, but this new one we're going to talk about based on of many articles, but a New York Times article. This episode we're going to talk about, I don't know if controversy is in air quotes in this case, but the controversy around the USDA's recent guidelines around, I think the controversy was around sugar and alcohol intake. I think probably we're going to focus just on sugar today, but we're going to dive into whether it was a controversy, your take on why, what happened is what happened, all that stuff. So we'll dive into that. Before we do though, we want to make sure folks know about your email list. Your email list gets lots of extra goodies.
They do. Bonus content.
Tell the people about it.
Generally, it's bonus content that's related to the podcast topic. So it goes a little more in depth. Not always, just sort of depends on what's available or what's relevant. So yeah, they can join at optimizemenutrition.com/email.
And a recent one that was very popular was your take on carbonated water.
That's right. It was.
Which apparently lots of people are curious about.
It was. That was a very popular one. So I hopefully answered that one.
All right, cool. All right. This topic around the USDA's, it's not new guidelines, right? The guidelines remain the same, and that was the controversy?
So the guidelines are released every 5 years. And so the new guidelines, the 2020 to 2025 guidelines were released at the very end of 2020. Now, I don't know that that was really the controversy. The controversy was what they contained, right? And people's opinions on what they contained. And to be honest, I sort of missed the new guidelines coming out. I knew that the 2020 ones were coming at the end of December, but holidays, whatever. So somebody actually sent me this New York Times article. And I actually think, listen, I really don't like to call out specific articles in negative ways, but I do think it's a perfect example of kind of how the media can spin up the public about a topic with these overly dramatic statements that have no nuance or context for the actual topic at hand. And it's pretty laughable. I mean, how they even make some really big claims about far-reaching things in it that are just like, oh my God. So from that standpoint, there was some drama. But basically what happened was the drama is that the USDA did not, listen to their own advisory committee's recommendations to lower the added sugar recommendation, right? So the USDA puts out a whole bunch of recommendations about what your diet can contain, and their standard recommendation about added sugar is to keep it at 10% of your total calories, and the advisory committee recommended that the USDA lower that from 10% to 6%. And basically the new guidelines stayed with the old standard at 10%. And so of course the article and kind of the drama that's spinned up is like, oh my gosh, like the USDA isn't listening to their committee about added sugar recommendations.
Yeah, we will do our best to stay out of the political end of this conversation, of this argument, because I do think that that's probably a large factor in it. But let's focus on this 10 to 6 percentage, or the lack thereof, maybe, because at first blush, you see that. I saw it when it first came out. It's like, well, yeah, people are eating too much added sugar, and isn't that something that you and I talk about all the time?
Yeah.
And so, shouldn't it be lowered? But what I'm hearing from you is like, let's tap the brakes here on the outrage. And let's actually understand what's going on here. So why that tension, why that sort of misperception or whatever that might be?
Yeah, I mean, at face value, it does sound bad, right? I mean, but this is where headlines can mislead us, and that just following the general mantra of like sugar is bad isn't really how we're going to understand and tackle this issue. There's way more nuance and relevance in the final guidance to understand what the USDA is saying. But I think the first thing to mention, we mentioned this in the other USDA podcast, it bears repeating, the first problem with all of this is no one is following their guidelines. I mean, their guidelines are used to help set school nutrition programs and other government-funded programs. So, of course, they have influence elsewhere. But like when we think about the general population, no one's really going to them for nutrition advice, at least not in my experience. I mean, how many people do you know that actually like download the article or download the guidelines and follow them? I mean,
I think the question is is the USDA any good at Instagram?
Right.
Because if they were, then they might have a chance.
I mean, I did actually go and look, and I mean, they're not posting every day about, simple dietary tips.
Yeah.
And so it's the same sort of thing. Like when people come to me, they're not like, well, are your guidelines in line with the USDA?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
So I think first of all, it's just a little out of touch, criticizing whatever the USDA is doing. It's just a little out of touch with the fact that people don't get their nutrition information there. In fact, more people are getting their nutrition information from the New York Times than the guidelines, if we're perfectly honest. And this isn't really the USDA's fault. They just don't have a ton of mainstream attention.
Yep. Okay, let's assume the USDA was good at Instagram.
Right.
What is the scientific evidence that is for or against this idea of reducing sugar or added sugars from 10% to 6% of our daily caloric intake?
Yeah, I don't think there is a ton of evidence for that reduction, but there's a couple things that we need to track on. I mean, the first is percentages, 10%, 6%, are generally meaningless unless we know that we're eating the right number of calories. Like I can argue about 10% or 6%, but until I know how many calories we're talking about, it's a little bit moot. Now, they're kind of low percentages, but still, like, let's actually track back to what we mean. 10% of 2,000 calories is 200 and 10% of 3,000 is 300.
Right.
So it's important to note that the USDA discusses the importance of eating the right number of calories, right? So when they say 10% of your calories or 6% of your calories, they're assuming that you're eating the right number of calories. And not everybody is, of course, but that's like kind of a big thing to understand this is, okay, are you eating the right quantity? Now, the next thing we do have to do a little math again. And I wish sometimes we had a whiteboard here that we could just sort of display for everybody as I'm talking, but this one's pretty easy. So women on average need 2,000 calories. Men on average need 2,500 calories. Of course, not perfect for every individual listener, a whole bunch of variables there based on age, etc. But let's go with men on average, just because that's going to yield a total higher absolute value here for sugar. So 2,500 calories on average for men, 10% of that would be 250 calories. And if we were to reduce that to the 6% recommendation, that's going down to then 150 calories. So the difference between these two standards is 4% or 100 calories. So before I go any further, do you really think that people's diets on average are so precise that we should be arguing about the choices they make for 4% of their calories? Like, does anybody have that level of precision on average? Now, some people certainly do, but on average, as a broad guidance, like all of their other decisions are going well. They're meeting the other recommendations for the fruits and vegetables. They're meeting the recommendations for protein. They're meeting the recommendations for total calories. And on any given day, their big decision is whether or not they're going to have the 100-calorie snack pack or an apple. I mean, I wish our diets were at that level of precision, right? But it's just not the discussion that we need to be having. And so again, I think it's a little bit out of touch with reality.
Yeah, you talk about that a lot, right? Let's not focus on that little 1% stuff when the other 99% is more important and less paid attention to. Okay, so let's go ahead and assume, though, I mean, we've got some CrossFitters out there. We've got some type A folks out there listening.
Yeah.
Let's just walk down the road of like, well, what is, for those folks, and I'm certainly not going to put myself in that category, for those folks, is there any added value to heeding this advice to drop from 10% to 6%?
Yeah, I still don't really think there would be. I do put this...
You just broke their hearts.
I do think I would put this in kind of in the realm of what we discussed in the biohacking podcast. We're kind of muddling around in the shades of gray without clinical significance, without meaningful, noticeable improvements in health, weight, performance. But one of the implicit assumptions here, and I have to keep stressing this, is that with these percentages, we're assuming the person is eating the right number of calories, and many people are not. In fact, these new guidelines say that 74% of adults in the US are overweight or obese. And then on average, those adults are having 13% of their calories coming from added sugars. So on average, people are eating too many calories, and too many calories are coming from those processed foods with added sugar. So the first step here is to eat less. I mean, and because of the caloric density of these processed foods, we're generally going to be eating less by eating less added sugar. But I just have to keep stressing that this is a case of misapplied precision, which is a phrase I stole from Kelly Starrett, and I love it. I mean, people are so worried about a standard that no one is following is failing us. But I still want to go down your what if a little bit more.
Pretend world.
Right. What if, I'm lean, I work out, I do the 800 gram challenge, I do lazy macros. Is there added value of further reducing my sugars from 10% to 6? I think math helps here again. Let's stick with that 2,500 total number of calories. Let's say they do the 800 gram challenge. That's a good amount of fruits and veggies that meets the USDA standards. That ends up being, as we've discussed before, about 500 calories. So this person who's trying to target 2,500 calories, they take off the 500 calories for their 800 gram challenge. They still have 2,000 calories to go. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Now let's say that they're doing their protein target for their lazy macros. Now we'd have to actually know their body weight. We're saying that this is an average male. Let's go with 180. So 0.7 grams of protein times that body weight, they would be targeting 126 grams of protein. Now to figure out the number of calories in that total amount of protein, if they were doing that with all, turkey and egg whites, we could just do the 126 grams of protein times 4, because that would give us the calories from that protein. That would be 630. The problem is not everyone only eats fat-free protein choices, right? So let's be a little more flexible there. Let's say it takes 1,000 calories to reach those 126 grams of protein. And it turns out this is, in fact, my protein target each day. So I can tell you that hitting 126 grams of protein with 1,000 calories to spend is very doable. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they started at 2,500 calories. 500 of those calories are going to the fruits and veggies of the 800 gram challenge. That takes them down to 2,000. Then to get their 126 protein, we're saying that they can have 1,000 calories from that, right? Great. So now they have still 1,000 calories left to eat out of their 2,500. What the heck are they going to do to get there? Well, this is where the USDA, this is where I recommend that, you can have additional fruits and veggies, you can have grains, you can have dairy, and yes, you can have some added sugars. Mm-hmm. And so now we're getting to the recommended added sugar levels. Like at that 10%, that's saying that, okay, of those remaining 1,000 calories, 250 of them could go towards added sugar, or 150 of them could go towards added sugar. Like, I just think we're so now in the weeds of being irrelevant, right? Like I just don't think it's going to matter at all, whether or not they have 100 calorie swing once we've put all those other stipulations in place.
Maybe just playing devil's advocate, but could the rest of those calories then, assuming that they're kind of in the ballpark of the right number of calories, could it just be added sugar? Or isn't that introducing a new set of problems, or does it, again, statistically insignificant? Yeah,
I mean, that's suggesting that, okay, we had these 1,000 calories to go of the 2,500. Could all that be added sugar? That then would be 40% of their diet from added sugar. And I like that question a lot because it helps illustrate a couple of points. And you might be surprised of my opinion about somebody doing that. I actually think it's going to be better than a lot of people are doing. And the first reason is because we have caloric control. Remember, 74% of people are overweight or obese. That means 74% of people do not have caloric control. So if this person is eating 2,500 calories because that's the appropriate number of calories for them, that is already better off than 74% of people in the US, right? Second, you've set this stipulation that they have 800 grams of fruits and veggies in there, right? And we even again, on this new report, over 80% of people are not having enough fruits and veggies in their diet. It also has the adequate protein, that we just went through. So I think that would actually be an improvement in a lot of ways from a lot of diets out there. I think where people get lost on this stuff is you have to remember that the goal of a diet is to achieve the right number of calories. And within that right number of calories, to eat the right number of macronutrients for your goals. So those calories are divided out into different macronutrients. And then those choices also contain the right amounts of fiber, and phytochemicals. The goal of nutrition isn't to eat a certain list of foods. The goal of nutrition is to eat the right amount of calories, macronutrients, micronutrients, fiber, and phytochemicals for your health, weight, and performance goals. And there's a nuance there. We achieve that goal through certain foods. But that's where people get so hung up because they're chasing certain foods, forgetting that these foods are mixtures of nutrients. And at the end of the day, if we've had enough if we've reached the right calories and we've reached the macros and we've reached the right micros, then the combination of foods that got us there are less important. If that makes sense. But lastly, on this kind of theoretical case, could I really answer that exactly? Like, could all of those calories go towards added sugar? Well, we'd have to really take a look at those 800-gram challenge choices. What were their fruits and veggies and those protein choices to really see, okay, what are the micronutrients? Am I getting enough from all of those foods? Are those adding up to the right totals? Are they getting enough fiber? Because people do come up with some weird things, right? Like somebody might do the 800-gram challenge all on pickles, right? Or they might do all of their protein from collagen or something like that. So they might, quote, follow the rules and still kind of not get the diversity that we need. And so I would need to do an analysis to make sure it's not the pickle and collagen diet, right?
Yes. Hashtag registered trademark.
That's a new trademark out there, the pickle and collagen diet. But yeah, I mean, generally, I wouldn't recommend that, that this general recommendation of doing that, even if whatever, their 800-gram challenge choices shake out, even if the protein shakes out.
Yep.
And the final kind of reason for that is these phytochemicals. These are the compounds in fruits and vegetables and plants that generally give them their bright colors. You've heard about them like resveratrol in wine and lutein in spinach, but there's 5,000 of these different compounds. And so even when you've already hit your 800-gram challenge, even when you've hit, your whole food-based protein sources, I think we're still filling up your balance of calories with a majority of whole foods is a less risky approach. Less risky because you're continuing to have more health protective compounds. Not a guarantee, less risky. So where's the cutoff between just filling up the balance and, having no amount of added sugar? Well, I think 10% is a great place to be. I think 40% sounds kind of excessive, a little risky to me. And I think 10% is a place where people can be moderate and have a snack, have a treat, and, still have, quote, a normal life.
And not yell at people on the internet.
Correct.
Okay. The one thing that kind of keeps bubbling up in this conversation, or at least, we've talked about it before, but the notion of how many calories should I be taking in every day, right? And you gave some estimates based on a general population, right? 2,000 calories for women, 2,500 for men. Is it worth doing maybe a quick little primer on how does an individual determine their individual caloric needs, just so that we can kind of flesh out this conversation fully?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, we have talked about this before. I repeat this a bunch, though. This is probably the question I get all the time: how much to eat? Whether or not it's how much to eat of X food, whether or not it's how much I should be eating. And so I do think we have to kind of rehammer this because it is so common. And people, I think one of the confusions here is they have these different contexts, right? I want to lose weight, or I want to gain weight, or I'm older, or I'm younger, or I'm more active, whatever. So, I'm now in menopause, whatever it is. And so they think they need these brand new calculations. And certainly there are calculators to help you with. But the thing to know is the way to truly know, the only way to truly know, to get the numbers that account for your genetics, your age, your hormonal fluctuations, your activity, your stress, your sleep, whatever the factor is in your lifestyle, is to weigh and measure your current intake. Weigh and measure every single thing you eat. And you can measure it in terms of calories, or you can do that in macronutrients. You can total your protein, carbohydrate, and fat grams. Because remember, each macronutrient has a caloric value. So you're kind of measuring calories either way. Now, you also have to do that for more than one day, because it turns out we don't do the same behavior on one day of testing, right? You're going to want to do it. We're not robots. And in fact, since you are collecting data, you probably will not act normal. So I recommend a week. Do that for a week and take your average. And that is how much food you're eating. That's your baseline. And from there, if you have excess weight that you want to lose, you're going to reduce that numbers if you're doing macros. And if you want to gain weight, you're going to increase those numbers. That is the most accurate data. That is the way to get the best prediction for you. And you have it at your fingertips. It's sort of funny. I mean, people want me to tell them the numbers to hit. And it's like, oh my gosh, you have more accurate data in front of you every single day, right? Yeah. And we've kind of talked about that process before in I think Quick Bites #1 and also the Improving Body Composition podcast. But I do see this effort to try to keep getting around this process of weighing and measuring your food because it's too cumbersome, or because we shouldn't have to do it, shouldn't in quotes, of course. But I think those people that are truly frustrated or truly don't quite have the results they want from their other diets, I mean, the process is going to be worth it. It certainly is painstaking. It is cumbersome. I don't love it. But you can keep trying with, I'm going to use the phrase again, these ideas of misapplied precision that are getting you nowhere. Whether or not, should I be having casein or whey protein, or whether or not I should have the locally sourced or frozen blueberries, or, whether or not my halibut has too many heavy metals. And it's like, do you know what total quantity of food is appropriate for you? And certainly that's not going to solve everything, but it gives people a ton of clarity for then making those other choices.
Awesome. I think it's a good place to start wrapping up. Anything else on this conversation about maybe, again, the air quotes around controversy? Anything else about maybe this conversation about calories that we want to make sure we leave people with?
I do think that, I still agree with the USDA's recommendations. I think that kind of came through a little bit, but I think it is a good place to be and for people to get to. And, I am going to talk about in my bonus email content for this episode, if somebody were not going to weigh and measure, is there any way they can still kind of know if they're falling within the guidelines? And so that's going to be going out on my email list.
Awesome. And just for folks, as a reminder, optimizemenutrition.com/email. We'll get you to where you can sign up for that. Thank you, EC. Thank you to everybody out there listening. Thank you for your ratings and your reviews. They are very helpful and they make EC and I feel better about ourselves. So please keep doing them. And we'll be back soon with another episode of The Consistency Project.